Hi there, Randy Green here, and welcome to this little podcast where I'm going to talk a little bit about some psychological aspects of what it means to be human and means to be human doing this work all together, because just being human within the base program and the normal reality, so to speak, in itself is a challenge which it's been talked about, but it's not really been talked about. But this is, again, remember, first and foremost, I have worked as a psychotherapist since 2007, and I have always been interested in human relations and human psyche and how to live in this world, asking the difficult questions already as a child. And for those of you who just jumped on board to this one, my goal is to touch ground with some of the things that probably is not normal to touch ground with on YouTube, right? And you kind of have to remember here, we're talking cultural differences because I come from Denmark, and in Denmark, we are comfortable talking about things that doesn't necessarily fit in. And it's quite normal to understand because we are a society that has a very strong social network. There is a strong social security. We try as hard as we can not to lose anyone. But of course, if people don't want to receive help, then you can do as much as you like. But it's not part of our culture just to let people swim on their own if we are trying very hard to assist and help. And we are, for the same reason, paying quite a high amount of tax, but that is to support our society and try to take care of the ones that are not capable of taking care of themselves, as well as offering a lot of free services. Free going to psychiatrist. If you go and see a doctor, you can get an appointment. It's not easy though with a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and you don't have to pay for it per se unless you choose to go on your own and then buy your sessions. So there are the two options. Of course, you can get it as a referral, and you can get it as something you pay on your own. Either way, I know people, it's there out there around the world too. But I think it's important to point out, because some of you, quite a lot of you I'm talking to and have as going through my work and are joining the ideas that I'm presenting. Many of you come from America and know we have cultural differences. Not that we're different people or that it matters anyway, but there are these little things here and there where you could say that in many ways in America, things work a little bit differently. The view on humans are a little bit different than the way we view humans here in Denmark, and how we approach life and society and what matters in the world is a little bit different in Denmark than it probably is in America. We are not to the same degree focused on earning a lot of money. There are, of course, but the majority of people in Denmark are quite content with the simple life, just to put it as it is, because we've got a place to live and we got things given our way and we are socially secure and all of these kind of things. Not that we are per se the happiest people in Europe. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying there are cultural differences that should be taken into account when you hear me talk about things that for you might seem a little bit offensive, but for us are not that strange, because we are quite open-minded. And yet, of course, we are also a closed culture, like every culture that has their own ways of being as who and what they are. And of course, we are a little bit cautious about taking people in, so to speak. You have to work a little bit for it. So again, just saying there are cultural differences, and that's okay. It's not a problem. We just need to be observant of it whenever we're having a conversation. And I know I'm here stepping quite away from the progression work, but that's because I want to focus more on what it means to be human doing this work. And at the same time also saying, well, we have the spectrum within the base program, who and what we are as humans, and then we have all the way up to who and what we are as what we call integrated higher dimensional humans. So we are in that weird spectrum between what we are now and what we can become, and the different aspects of our inner human and what that means when we begin to integrate that. Aside from capacities and abilities to work with energy and see other realities and all of these otherworldly or ESP functionalities that we will develop. But we are also humans, and we have been humans quite a long time before we begin this journey in developing the other levels of our human spectrum. And that must also be taken into account. And I know I, for many years, have just been high up, and I am high up most of the time. But from time to other, I kind of descend, not to mean that in a patronizing way, but I go down in energy, and I want to go down in energy again, because what I was looking for in the higher levels, in a way, I'm kind of there. And part of integrating that is also to take these new capacities and these new understandings of who and what we are, and having my process have been in my work to be comfortable with that and being a way shower of holding these capacities. And then at the same time, aside from exemplifying them, also saying, okay, but there is also a human aspect to me. And that's who I were the first 30, 35 years, right? And that goes for many of you, because there is this kind of, we have features, we have insights, we have different perceptions of reality. We feel different from the rest of our family or from our friends, because we perceive in a different way. And I'm pretty sure many of us, if we were born today, we'll probably get a diagnosis of some sort, ADD or a super sensitive or a slightly Asperger or something like that, without actually being it. But that's because society is struggling to deal with these new neural networks that are firing in a different way than we are accustomed to. And that's hard on what we could say the professionals and the science branch of humans that have kind of tried to figure out some kind of security within specific belief systems and specific lines of thought, and like to kind of label everything and classify everything. We're seeing that even with the new ones that are coming in that have this different gender orientation that doesn't really feel either male or female, and talking about it. And I just want to put it out there that we had that when I was young as well, not to patronize or diminish it or anything. The difference is now we're talking about it. We didn't do it back then. It was just kind of, if we were lucky enough to have a parent that understood that search for who and what are we when we go from our teens and into the early 20s and into our adulthood, where we try to figure out who am I, what am I, inside the institutions, outside the institutions, who do I want to be? And in that process, it is a different culture today because of the social network and the social media, where we share a lot of stuff that is good to a large degree, and at the same time also complicates things that doesn't need to be so complicated. But we must not overlook that humans are changing, and these young people are different in many, many ways. So humanity is taking some kind of evolutionary leap, whatever that means. And we have this schism between the old world and what is coming, and not just because as in, oh yeah, the young people are always different than the older generations. We know that there's always a schism there. But for me, it feels different. It feels different because of the technology that we have now. And it feels different because of the social media. And it feels different because young people are growing up with that ability to access all levels of information that works for good and for ill in them. That if they don't have parents that support them in that process of digesting all of that information quickly, can spin off in all sorts of ideas, which we're also seeing where people are completely losing ground with reality. And some would say that what I'm doing could quickly lead to that same kind of deception and lead people into something where they don't really understand what is up and what is down, and what is true and what is not true, and what is reality and what's not reality. So I have that responsibility as well. And that's why I wanted to put it on the highest level first so you can see this is where I want to go with humanity. But at the same time, we have a lot of work to do on the normal human level as well, which is what I also want to work with. But I began there years ago, and then I discovered that there was a search and a need for answers on the other levels as well. So that's why I had to make a choice to make what you could say the other dimensional stuff first, where we are also humans, and then use that as a kind of, that's the bar, that's where we need to go in whatever capacity that means, because we're not labeling and classifying, even though we can do that. But these are just personas. These are just moments in time where we are this or we are that. And that's also a new way to learn to be human. In the older psychological materials talked about, you put on a different cap. When you go to work, you're one person. When you go back home, you're another person. When you're around your parents, you're a third person, and onward and so forth. And we have different roles in life. So we are kind of accustomed to shape shift a little bit, psychologically speaking, to accommodate for the situation that we get into. At least that we should be able to, via our frontal lobe, developmental processes, but also what we could call social skills, to be observant in the situation and be able to read the environment. What do I need to be here without losing yourself, without becoming unauthentic? Because that's another point of this integration process and the processes, psychologically speaking, with development and developing ourselves, is to get out of the impressions, and I'm here really mean impressions, what has been pushed onto us from others, and their acceptance and their projections of what they wanted us to become or be, as we experienced as kids, which many have just grown into. This is how we do it in our family. This is what my mom wanted me to be. This is what my dad wanted me to be. And then we try to live up to these criteria, whether they were verbalized or not. Kids are very sensitive. They know by the facial features of their parents. They know if they have been accepted or not, if they're doing something that is right or wrong. No matter how hard a parent tries to hide the disapproval, it's an energy that emanates from the solar plexus, and sensitive kids are very sensitive to that, really picking up on these kind of things. And then the worst thing is kind of having picked up that negative energy, but not understanding why. So that's also part of shaping our personality construction. When we're experiencing all of these unsaid emotional emissions that are coming from our parents, and the parents are not good at verbalizing and say, you know what, and in that situation, what you did there, I have difficulty accepting that behavior, or I don't know how to deal with this because that's not how I want to do it, all depending on the age of the child, of course. So again, we're going into this, how well suited were the parents in communication and in the mirroring process of who and what they are compared to who and what the child is, and how do we work together? Because even though you are my kid and my offspring, and you have my DNA and you have a lot of my traits, you also have your individuality. And how can I best be at service for you with your individuality, so you feel seen and heard and acknowledged, so that you can become a full-blown, viable, functional human being in this world? And I don't think many parents think that way. I think most parents just kind of don't really know why they get kids, other it's a biological imperative. That's how we do it. You get the job, you get the education, you get the job, you get the house, you get the husband, or you get the husband, you get the house, and then you get the kids, right? That's how we do it in this society. So all of these institutions will come up and be looked at, because there has always been people that had difficulties with these institutions, but the masses, to put it that way, the majority were functional inside these institutions, or were prioritizing these institutions. Today, it's a little bit opposite, to be honest, and it is exciting in a way, and at the same time, it's a little bit scary, because there are potentials for growth, but there are definitely also potentials for anarchy, to put it that way, because suddenly we are all allowed to be individualized, which is good. We should. But there is also this, I am me, and I want to be authentic, and I want to speak my voice, and I want to be who I am, no matter the cost of others. That is an imbalance, because we need to figure out, in my opinion, how to be us, but at the same time also be considerate about the other us's that are out there. There are them and there are us, but we are part of the same race, and we are part of the same society, and we are part of the same world, and we are to figure out how to solve some of the issues that are in this world. And if we don't learn how to work together as a team to solve these issues, and we stand strong on our individuality, and that who and whoever want to do it my way and your way can take the highway, right? Then we'll have problems in solving these things. But I don't want to go back to the old ways where the generations I grew up with, because I'm in my 50s, as you recall, where all of this, which I felt was a huge problem because I always felt wrong in all of these knitted a network of people that were doing things in a specific way, where my brain works differently. Whenever I got into a job, wherever it was always, I know it's demanding starting a new job. That is for everybody. You get tired and whatever. But for me, coming in and literally just kind of within all of the first 3 weeks, I had everything under control, and then I began getting bored. Who does that, right? I was looking at people having been in their jobs for 30 or 20 or 30 years and being happy doing the same job every day, doing the same stuff every day. And I was just kind of, how can you be content with that? And you see me work now. You don't know much, but you see me post a lot of stuff on YouTube, and I'm just blah, 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 blah. And I'm doing courses, and I'm doing websites, and I'm doing all sorts of stuff. And I'm having sessions, and working with aliens, and I'm out walking, and I'm exercising, and all of these kind of things. So I got a different type of energy. I work in a different way. And a normal workplace for me is like, you might as well just put a rope around my neck and tie me to the chair, and then gag me or something, and just force me to look at something. I don't know. It felt meaningless to me. So I had difficulty in that. And I knew that I had to do something where I could work in my own flow and create. But at the same time, I wanted to create something that really mattered for society, because for me, work has to have meaning. What I do has to have a meaning and a purpose. I can't just do ridiculous work. As you know, those of you who have heard me for a long time, you have referred to it many times. That's kind of what eventually I ended up being a secretary for a little bit of what we could call a dinosaur kind of boss. And I was the one that I withstand him for 2 years, because I figured out how to deal with it. At that point, I had gone down with stress. That's why I ended up being a secretary and not having one of these more fancy types of job I had before that. But I was already beginning to crash, but I didn't really know what to do. And that was in 2005. So anyway, so I figured out, because I had the stress from a previous job where I actually was, there I peaked completely, and I crashed with a peak, because I took too much onto my shoulders, and I did too much at the same time, and I had a divorce I had to get out of, and all these kind of things. So many things on my plate, as always. That's kind of a theme in my life. Too many things on my plate at the same time, which I then have to figure out to solve, as in kind of bounce off the balls, right? But anyway, so the way I dealt with that dinosaur boss, which everybody else kind of fled from, and I got that at the interview, as in kind of, I heard afterwards when I said yes to the job, let's see how long you last. The last one, she only lasted 1 month. Just kind of, whoa. And that was that the record had been 4 months, and then people would quit because he was a piece of work. Anyways, I figured out how to deal with him, because at that point in time, I already had done my psychotherapist training, and had got my license, and I started it up and then shut it down because it was not the right time to begin that. So I took jobs instead and became a recruiter and all this other stuff. And I was still a single mom, and I was dealing with life as it was, right? After the divorce and all sorts of things. Anyway, so point being, I needed a job. So I had to figure out how to solve that one, because I didn't have any solution. So I was there until I found the solution. And the way I dealt with him was, whenever he became obnoxious and went too dinosaur and too psychopathic, I would just start to cry. Literally. So who does that? So we had a weird relationship, and eventually he actually, because I also spoke up, and I I was just kind of, yeah, if you don't like what I'm doing, you can do it yourself. So we were having some kind of a power struggle going on there. And apparently he kind of enjoyed it, because I remember one of the last times he was actually getting a little bit too close. He put his hand on my knee, and I was just a little bit kind of, yeah, that's inappropriate, dude. So, and I knew then it was time for me to leave, because then he was clearly beginning to see me in a capacity that was not healthy for either of us. So there I knew I had to figure out something else. So I went out and became a cleaner instead, cleaning in an institution in the mornings. And then I began creating my own business. Anyway, so we are all having these different ways of doing stuff. But my work life within the BASE program has always been this kind of weird thing, and I'm sure many of you have experienced that as well. This whole scenario that everything is just perfect and nice and fine, that people are playing. But I have observed the others, again, these people that are very content with this kind of life. And I'm not saying I'm envying them, what's not at all, but they're very easygoing, simple people, and it must be easy to live that way. It must be easier to live like that kind of human in society. But the problem is for those of us who doesn't fit in. So that's some of the things we need to explore. The why we didn't fit in. Do we not fit in because we have had psychological traumas from childhood? That's one level of it, but they have had it too, but they were perhaps not so sensitive to it. So this is, again, how does that apply and affect our central nervous system? And my good friend I refer to from time to time, she's got a daughter with ADD, and her son has more what we call ADHD. And it turns out she has got the ADD gene herself. So of course she's bringing it on to her kids. And the son, he's saying, well, I'm not going to have kids. He's more severely hit, so to speak. He had struggles as a kid. I remember him growing up, and he had big problems. But his mom, which is my friend, she has done everything she can to help him, and she has now become a professional therapist working with kids with these issues. So she has done a really good work with him. He's functional. He's part of society. He's taken an education, and he's helping where he can. He has learned communication. He has learned to control himself, and she's still struggling with him, even though he is now in his 20s. She's really done a good job there. Daughter a little bit less so, but that's because the daughter technically not heavily afflicted in the same way, but she had suffered the ramification of both having her own ADD that was not discovered, and at the same time being the little sister of the brother, and he was violent and he was acting out and he was very difficult, and mom had to take care of him first. So little sis were kind of left a little bit on her own. So she didn't get the same attention. And I discovered some of these things because I actually healed on her and assisted her in clearing out some of her inflictions because of her childhood. So that can be healed away, but she was too young for that process. Some of the things that came up, some of the things she could deal with, she could, but a lot of stuff she was simply too young. So anyway, so that's another discussion. When can you actually begin to be part of healing sessions? You have to have that understanding of the images that comes up when you are a capable healer. And that's one of my features, is both being clairvoyant and a healer and psychotherapist. So that means when I put hands on people, I'm doing all three things in one go. So that means that I can pull things up to be worked with when I worked as a healer. And I wanted to explore that deeper. But as you know, 2016 kind of crashed a lot of things for most of us. So anyway, so point being in all of this, the boy, the oldest boy, he has said, I don't want to put children into the world because I don't want to pass on my bad genes. And you know what? I find that honorable. I find that with a very clear insight. And I'm not going to say I wish there were more people like that, but in a way I am. Because if people were really looking into their own capacities and who and what they are and discover, it doesn't have to be like that for everybody, but it's not a biological imperative to get children. My dad's second wife, she did not get children for reasons and purposes. And I grew up with that, a woman that chose to her career and chose to, well, she came after my mom, right? But she's still with my dad, and they have a very, very brilliant, nice friendship relationship that is admirable for all ways and forms, with the disorders they came in with into that relationship. So I had that, including my own mom and dad and their dysfunctional relationship, right? So we all have these things around us. It shows us something and teaches us something, where people that are come from families that always stuck together, they have a different perception of things, and what a relationship should be, and what commitment is in a relationship, and all of these things. We know that children from divorcees, they have a tendency to repeat the pattern of their parents. But the question is that because of the psychological affliction, or is it because it's in the DNA? I'm just saying. When I lived in my old apartment, my neighbor, he was, aside from smoking, a lot of cannabis because he felt it helped him with his ADHD, and he was very heavily afflicted by it, enormously sensitive, but a bright kid and a kind kid, and nothing there is not about stigmatizing people with ADHD. He said something very clever, I think, because we had some conversation, and there is a lot of this. When you don't fit into society, it affects your self-worth. So he was struggling to figure out who and what he was with his self-worth and with his capacities in the world. And he has the social network. I'm talking about security here in Denmark, that he was on what we call social income, right? Because he could not function in a job. So he was self-medicating, which of course span off completely. And you know as well, I've been working with drug addicts for a whole year as a psychotherapist, and it's, anyways, and cannabis is absolutely not one of my thumbs up. On the contrary, I'm not, you will not get me on board of that it's healthy and all these kind of things. Not at all. For me, it messes up the brain, and eventually it will create psychosis, because I've seen that as well. My mom had a boyfriend who smoked too much, and he became completely psychotic. So I've seen it. So, and so in first-hand experiences, right? Anyway, so, the guy next door, he said that he perceived his brain to be of an older variety, that his genes were of an older type. And I got a very clear signature for him that he had genes that were more predominant in the time of Atlantis. So he was spot on. But where does he go with that knowledge? Can he go to a psychologist and say, you know what, I think the reason why my brain works in a different way and I perceive reality in a different way is because my human DNA and my brain neurons, they are the same type that were in play in Atlantis. And then the question, of course, goes, why has he been reborn? Why is he here? Why is that DNA still here? What's going on? Why are they not working well in the brain today? Was it because they didn't work well in the brain back then? Is it because the society has changed and by that it comes out with a different feature? These kind of questions, as in, does this type of DNA malfunction because the frequency fence and because of the lower level of frequency energies that we have in our reality? Whereas during Atlantis, there was the fifth dimension. So they're supposed to hook up to the fifth dimension, but there is no active fifth dimension, or there is one that's highly distorted. So by that hooking up, they're hooking up to something that is normally distorted. What are these symptoms that we're seeing? Where do they come from? What is the basis of them? And I think that's some of the things that needs to be investigated further, but that's beyond the scope of science. Because first and foremost, go into a scientist today and say, yeah, I'm clairvoyant when I put my hands on people and I put specific places on their body. I get imagery of their childhood because I can lodge into their cellular memory and by that reveal what they hold, because I am activating my own perception field and expand it over the client. And by that, I'm able to merge my field with the client's and draw it up as a projection mechanism where the client can see it as well. You can't say that to a scientist, right? So with this whole kind of DNA and the traits, human traits, and how much DNA plays a role in our personality traits, that's where science again is saying, yeah, we can't say that there is a possibility for this, and there this switching on and off, and it's more nurture than it's nature, and all of these discussions where I'm pretty sure but they will in the future figure this one out. But I also know why they are very, very careful. And that's because we had the whole eugenics going on not far 100 years ago or so, or prior to the Second World War, right? And we had prior to that one, 200 years ago, some people that were trying to classify humans by looking at their skulls and saying that type of skull is Neanderthal, so that person is violent and aggressive and a psychopath, which we know, of course, is not correctly. But so there is this background to try and avoid that classification that stigmatizes people. But that should not prevent us from actively looking into, okay, these chemical structures are presenting a type of personality structure, because not to make it all chemical. So yeah, eat this pill and you will change your personality structure and become something else. That would be horrible. But kind of going in supportively and saying, okay, what's actually going on here? What are the psychological traits of the human DNA? Not just the pathological. That's kind of when you go in and you can measure it as an illness, right? But the classification of what is pathological is also determined by science. So again, it goes within their spectrum of understanding. So people with skills that falls outside of society, it has always been that way. They are easily classified as either lunatics or witches or warlocks or what have you, or, all the different sayings that we have throughout history. And there are people where their brain function is absolutely whack and they are not capable of functioning in society. But when we are having highly functional people, again, compared to what? But they are having a normal life. They are getting up every morning. They are doing their daily shower. They are feeding themselves. They are taking good care of themselves. That's more than most do, actually. They are performing some kind of existence inside reality. They are producing something that is of use for society, whatever that is. That's again up for a debate what that is, because their skills might not be recognized yet, right? But it still goes into that one. Are we dealing with a person that is functional, even though his or her mindset works in a different way? And is that different approach actually an older type of human or a new type of human? And how do we learn to work with these new skill sets? But at the same time, those of us who do have that different kind of brain capacity, we must always self-adjust and look into ourselves and know when we are kind of losing it, and then learn to stabilize ourselves. Because that's also part of it. We are having within the normal base program scale of self-adjustment, which people are not particularly good at. And then we are having this range of us that have a different brain chemistry, and the sensitivity and ESP and clairvoyant abilities and all sorts of sensitivity things on top of it. We have a double task in doing so. And that's some of the things I want in the work that I am pointing at here, is that instead of making us unfit for the world, because that's technically how I felt most of my life, I've tried to go in and say, okay, then I'm not going to make myself fit by fitting into the world that I see as diminished, and I always felt that way, not for me. But how can I create something where others can prosper as well, but where we are, from all movies and all sorts of stuff, where we become the new normal? No, that's not what I'm saying, because I don't think there is such a thing as normal. I don't think there is such a thing as new normal. I would never assume that people like us becomes the new norm. Not at all, because we don't like to be the norm. That for those of us who are really deep into our higher capacities, we enjoy the change, we enjoy the progression, we enjoy challenging ourselves, developing ourselves, take on projects, figuring that one out. And that's a huge difference what I'm seeing most people around our planet. There are not many people that feel that. There are, of course, the entrepreneurs and the ones that are innovative and the pioneers and all of these kind of things, but they're still working within the base program paradigms. So we're here talking about people that are trying to change the paradigm, and we have a specific task that demands 10 times more of us. And trust me, I'm a woman, so I also know that that's part of it as well, because all this mansplaining and man dominance and males out there that think that they own the world and everything is up to discussion and everything can be solved intellectually and not emotionally or what have you, all these kind of things. So, and there are the other men that are, of course, not of that bunch, but there is a tendency within business, very male dominated, right? So I had my share of bosses and all these kind of things. So point being in all of this, when we talk about the high awareness lifestyle, I'm not trying to give us an out where we go in and say, oh yeah, I got ADHD or I got ADD or I got Asperger or whatever diagnosis that have been put onto you. Or the point being is that we go in and accept, yes, we function in a different way. And then we begin to investigate it. Not just absorbing the diagnosis and are content with that, but actually go in and figure out a way. Okay, I might work in a different way. I might function in a different way, but I need to be who and what I am. But I also need to respect that others are choosing to exist and be in another way, so that we, in that way, take these weirdnesses and put them into this weirdity and put it into what we call a capacity of a different way of being human. And I call it a new way of being human because technically it's probably an old way of being human, but it's new in this society. So we are also on this exploration journey of figuring out who are we, what are we as humans with this different neurological structure, with this different kind of chemistry. And I'm not the whole fond of, yeah, let's put these kids into diagnosis because I got a different perspective of these kids. Because remember, I kind of have a little thing with aliens, right? And I kind of know the hybrid kids and some of these things that are not working very well. So there is a completely different explanation behind these diagnosis kits and why their brain works in a different way. And what the greater picture of that actually is, and the attempt to evolve humanity into a new genetic structure. So that's also part of the picture. Again, of course, not something that other people will easily accept. And the important thing for us is that we are not going to use it as crutches. We are going to use it to take the responsibility for our own evolution, for our own continued development of who and what we are as humans. Because I think first and foremost, that is our most important responsibility living in this world, that we must develop as a species. Always strive for the highest capacities and the highest ways of being human and the best ways of being human, so that we are inclusive and caring and compassionate and patient and have empathy and understanding for each other. But at the same time, we are also productive and strategic and intelligent and scientific and innovative and pioneering and doing all of this that goes with the left hemisphere. So we are putting our entire brain to work along with an upscaled, completely developed emotional field that is capable of holding all sorts of emotion and understanding exactly what that is and how we can use it to achieve the goals that we want to put into the world, because it is a vibration. So this is also part of mastery of energy, that we become masters of who and what we are as a human being while we are developing the higher consciousness potential to integrate them and expand what it means to be a human being inside of this world. So that is what I'm striving for. And that's why I made the whole project Blue Flower, to say we have all of these petals, that all of these levels of reality that we need to master. And then we have to go beyond that and master their equivalent in the higher dimensions, pull it into who and what we are, and by that become a completely new type of human inside this solar system. Thank you.